going to you what I read from Professor Carl Kirkner. So Professor Carl Kirkner is a father. He's a son of both deaf parents. The father lost his hearing at 7 when he fell from a foundation wall. And then he only has 1 year of education. Yet he cannot read nor write, but he communicates orally with a few signs. On the other hand, the mother lost her hearing at 2 because of influenza virus. And then she went to school at age 10, but was dismissed at age 17 because the teacher said she was too old already for that kind of class. And then she learned to sign secretly. So at home, they communicate with their father through orally, to their mother through signs, and up to now, they're still amazed at how their parents communicated when they were young. And because of that led them to be of service to the deaf and hard of hearing adult in his education. He's been serving the deaf and adult. He's been serving in the deaf and hard of hearing. He's been serving in the deaf and hard of hearing education world for 54 years. He established the Deaf and Hard of Hearing Teacher Preparation Program at California State University. He is still an assistant and associate professor. He also co-founded Los Angeles K-12 Deaf and Hard of Hearing School. It's called Tripod. And also served as a consultant for the California State Department of Education. Also the president of Southern California Registry of Interpreters for the Deaf, National Registry of Interpreters for the Deaf, and the Convention of American Instructors of the Deaf. He's also an overseas consultant to the Jockey Club signed Bilingualism and Co-Development in Deaf Education Research Program in Hong Kong. I want to share with you his words verbatimly. He's saying that armed with latest research on the brain and educational pedagogy, which states that children learn from their peers, deaf education must move into the 21st century with strong and bold determination not to do business as usual. Classrooms must become child-centered and not teacher-directed. Furthermore, he added that we have to find academic settings that support the capabilities of the students. It could be combination classes, basic core curriculum classes, co-tech classes, or co-enrollment classes. And to do that, it becomes necessary to think outside the deaf education box. So he's saying that educational success equals environmental change. And by the way, this is the title of his book. So he finds it necessary for us to invent the academic environment. According to his review of literature for his paper, he noted that the language centers of the deaf child's brain atrophies or it weakens if it is not stimulated. When we say stimulated, it should be engaged with interesting activities or it should be used continuously. He also noted that the perceived deficit of deaf students in terms of education or the limitation of education is not the lack of basic intelligence. It is instead information deprivation. So meaning the limitation of deaf students is not actually on their thinking skills, but based on the amount of information given to them. I think of all the literature that's what's, for me, is the most important, or it strikes me the most. What deaf children get out of life will depend to a large part on the type of education that we invest in them. So for me, as a classroom teacher, the burden is not how the students would learn, but the burden is how will I teach so they will learn. As of the moment, we are in the 21st century and we have to build or train or facilitate learning to the 21st century learners. And they should have all these skills at the same time. Meaning, you need to have critical thinking and problem-solving skills. They need to have initiative and business sense, even if they're not business majors. They need to be lifelong learners with curiosity and imagination. They should also be hopeful and optimistic. They should also be self-regulated, meaning they have the initiative and the motivation to learn on their own. They need to see their future or vision of what they can do. They also need to be resilient, have the capacity to adapt. So they would learn how to collaborate with different networks. They also have to have effective oral and written communication with empathy and global stewardship, or the ability to care for others, their environment, and other people. So how do you do that? Okay. First, let's compare a tale of two classrooms. This is how we do it, or the past, or this is how we're taught. And this is how it should be. Remember that the kids of today, they're digital natives. I mean, they grew up digitally. We have all the iPads, we have computers, we have everything. We know what icons will be. We, on the other hand, are digital migrants. We transferred from pen and paper. I started using computer when I was in grade 6. And that's MS-DOS in black and white. Kids nowadays, whether deaf or hearing, they're exposed to all colored, all icons, all fast-paced. Okay. So how do we move from one paradigm or teaching paradigm to another? So let's compare. With Classroom A, this is what Ms. Lizelle explained about teacher-centered. The teacher knows everything. So the teacher is the only source of information. When you have a mistake, it means it's a low grade. If a student would have a mistake, it means it's a low grade. The teacher only questions when the kid answers or the kid listens. The only goal is to have good grades and to go to the next level. Okay? We usually memorize facts but not actually use them. Our goal is to finish reading books and finish pages. And then one size fits all, meaning one type of teaching style would be for everybody. And then rules are highly enforced. So the rules are so high because the teacher is the one controlling everything. On the other hand, and this is what Professor Cooperative is encouraging, for Classroom B, the teacher is also a learner. So you're not a know-it-all. You learn with your students, but you have the command of the content and you know what to teach. Mistakes would be an opportunity to learn. It's not having bad grades. It's actually how can we improve on that. Kids or students should have the ability to question, answer, and think. If they have a question, we all, or the teacher and other students will have to brainstorm together in order to answer the question. The goal is learning and to solve problems in order to create something. It's not anymore just memorizing words, but it's creating, having a product or having a process. And then one size fits each, meaning there's there's a little bit of individualized learning. are unnecessary, not because they're well behaved, but because they are self-regulated. They have the motivation and the initiative to learn. So as teachers, how do we do that? We have to be a 21st century teacher. So how's that? We need to have access to the web. That's not a problem. I think everyone has IG. I don't have Instagram. At least Facebook, Twitter. IG, Twitter. I only have Facebook. The others I don't have. So I don't have Twitter also, just Facebook. But nowadays, all students would have social media. Okay, so we need to be in with the trend. We have to build a new paradigm. That old way, the old is past already. We have new types of learners, so we need to have new types of teaching styles. We also need to have the skill sets for the 21st century, yung pinakita ko kanina. We need to be able to create any process or do actual research inside our classrooms. We need to manage information because the problem now is not information. There's so much information. The thing is, how do you manage the information? What information is needed by the students? We need to have a thinking pedagogy, which means we need to reflect and evaluate the kind of teaching that we do inside the classroom, okay, in order to create a good learning environment for the students. And also, he's saying that we have to return home or have a work-life balance. Right, so these are strategies adapted from co-enrollment principles. Some of them can be used here right now in college, while some will be for the upper high school. First would be direct communication access, student to student or teacher to student. An example would be giving of feedbacks. Students may evaluate the work of their classmates by giving positive and negative comments. Feedbacks will not just come from the teacher because sometimes we miss information or we miss the criteria. Okay, or teachers may give direct feedback first to give time for the student to edit their work before evaluating, because the grade should be in the process of learning, not just in the product. Number two, learning environments that utilizes cooperative learning strategies, visuals, and teaming to implement. Examples of that would be the use of Bilingualism online or other online courseware. The use of softwares also, the use of applications. Next would be cooperative learning strategies, which means activities should not be individualized. It should be more cooperative because the idea is they also learn from each other. Another example of that would be a long-term group work, a problem-based learning for the whole term. Like you start at the first week and they process it until the end of the term, and that's their major project. Next is acceptance of whatever works philosophy in addressing the initial needs of the students. It means whatever would help the student. So it could be going back to the basics, or it could be advanced. It depends on the type of student that you have. So for example, in studying technical terms, they can do, in order for them to remember, they can create an icon or a logo or a drawing for them to understand and remember that word. I think we do this at read science in the classroom. Sometimes we don't have the technical science yet. Next would be classroom design that allows for educational flexibility and assignment creativity. Projects should be relevant to their future jobs. For example, LMA, infomercial, or developing life skills. It would also help if they're given options to present their final output. There's not just one way, but there are 3 ways. For example, they can do a website or video documentary or vlogs. Or teacher and student both decide on the lessons to be discussed in a specific topic. For example, in a reproductive system class, I asked them what topics are interesting, and that's what will be discussed in the classroom. This one is, I'm not sure if it's applicable to college, but could be in the other high school. I'll make it quick and fast. This is flexibility in utilizing co-teaching formats. One teacher, one assistant is best for spiral program like K-12 because the teacher and the assistant can switch roles depending on their forte. If one is good in chemistry, she'll teach chemistry. If the other one's good in physics, she'll teach physics. The other one is, the next one is station teaching. It's best for introducing different tasks. There are a lot of stations wherein the students can go to different stations for them to master the task. Next is parallel or alternative teaching, best for imitation or bridging. When some of the students cannot cope, there's a teacher for that group of students. While the average and the advanced will also have their own teachers. Complementary instruction, best when teachers are complementary. So there are 2 teachers. If I'm good in arts and crafts, I'll teach the arts and crafts, and if one teacher is good in instruction, she'll do instruction. The other one, cooperative group teaching, it's best to answer different learning styles of students. So 2 teachers having 2 different styles of teaching, but they teach simultaneously. So the student will have a choice if she wants, or the student would want the other teacher or the other one. And lastly, pull-in instruction. This is best for specialized or technical topics or courses. You pull out, for example, if you want to teach production, you can pull out a director and then the director will teach. It's getting an expert or a specialist in that course. Environment in the classroom and expectations of teachers on the students make the major difference between failure and success, by Professor Cooperative. Any questions? Do we have time for questions?